In this tutorial, we will turn an untextured model into this as quickly as possible using preset shaders, area lights, and an occlusion and depth pass. The college I teach at is still using mental rate until summer, so I'll be using those shaders instead of Arnold's. I realise that makes this video out of date before I even upload it to YouTube, but my students are worth it. The first step is to download a 360-degree image from hgrlabs.com. Just type in the address up here. If you are going for a dark lit scene like this, you're going to want to download Factory Catwalk. If you're going for something a bit more light and Apple-y, you might want to go for SIGGRAPH 2007 and go ahead and download those and unzip it. Once you've downloaded it, you're going to want to find the file called like the file name BG. It's a JPEG file, probably about 8 or 9 megabytes. If it's the SIGGRAPH one, it might be the 8K JPEG image, and put those into your Maya source images folder. You should always be working from projects, and in I'm in default because I'm teaching, but sling it in source images. Now we'll go into Maya, and I've got a completely untextured model here. It's just got Lambert 1 on it, the default material in Maya. The first thing we're going to do is put in a ground plane and a sphere, and then we can start adding shaders. So let's put in a ground plane. Just drag that out and resize it up. And we're going to create a sphere as well, like this, and make it ridiculously enormous, and make sure it completely goes around your scene like that. We're going to apply the image that we just downloaded from the internet to the inside of that sphere. So right click in your sphere, assign new material. We want to assign a surface shader because we don't want this sphere to cast or receive any shadow. So go to surface shader 1, and go to out color, and go to File, go to the yellow folder, and locate your the image you want to use. For me, I'm going to use Factory Catwalk. Hit open on that. You might need to turn on textured view over here so you can have a preview of what's going on. And you can see it looks like you're inside this environment now here. Next thing we're going to want to do is start adding some shaders and some light. So select the ground plane, right click, and we're going to assign new material, and you need to look for this mental ray section over here and go to materials. If you can't find this, you need to go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, scroll to the bottom, there's something called Maya to mr.mll, hit loaded and auto load and close that, and it'll be there. Then go to MIA Material X. We're going to name this copper underscore grey. Go to presets, go to copper, replace, change the colour, both of the colours to some kind of grey colour. There, the diffuse and reflection. I might even make the main colour sort of black, like this. This is the first shader that we've added. We have no idea what it's going to look like in our renders yet, so we need to start adding some lights. If you turn on your light bulb with the light bulb icon over here, your whole scene should go black except for your environment over here. So you go to Create Lights, and we're going to use area lights mainly for this. So pop in an area light, it's in the middle of your grid, hit W for move. I should have my controls visible down here for you, and move that out, and you can start lighting your scene. If you just angle that around and move it back, you can then do a quick test render of your scene. While we're doing test renders, go to your render settings up here. We need to make sure we're rendering using a mental ray. So if you've got any problems with your renders, it's because you're not using mental ray, and we need to set the quality to something quite rubbish like this. If your computer's really bad, or you're on a Mac, type in that, and then go to Common, and HD 540 should be fine. If your computer's really rubbish, go up to one of these guys up here, and you can close that down and render that. Okay, so we've got like a blurry reflection of our electronic device, and we can see the industrial environment being reflected in there. If you've got a good computer and you have autosave set up, you may want to set up an IPR render where it renders live all the stuff that you're doing. It's quite useful. So you can hit IPR up here, and if you just make this window slightly smaller, you can drag and select an area that you want to render live, and it should just start rendering immediately like this. And so if I was to make this smaller, maybe over there, and if I was to make this light larger, you can see the effect that that has in real time. This does get a bit crashy, especially if you start hitting the undo button. It doesn't really like it. Sometimes it doesn't even know that you've added an extra light. If you have any problems, you can always close it down, reopen it, and select an area again, and it will start rendering. So do that if you have to make new geometry, or then it doesn't remember that you've done it or something. So I'm just going to leave that going on over there, like that. Next thing we need to do is start applying some shaders to our headphones over here. So if I zoom in, the first thing we're going to do is add a rubber material to the ear pad things here. So select anything that you want to be made out of rubber and right click, assign new material. Again, Mentor materials, MIA material X, should have come up with MIA material X over here, and rename that to rubber, and hit enter. You have to hit enter or things start going wrong. And make the colour really quite dark to start with, and probably the reflection colour as well, fairly dark, probably even darker. Again, you can see my render view here doesn't even know I've assigned a new material yet because it's stupid. I've got to do that again. There we go. And now if I adjust the properties of that rubber material, it should update live. So you want to get those colours really quite dark, almost black but not quite. Next, we're going to assign a glossy plastic material. So select any objects that you want to be made out of glossy plastic, which I'm just going to go for this and that for now. So right click, assign new material. Again, Mentor materials, MIA material X, and name it glossy plastic, and go to presets, and it's glossy plastic, replace, and make the material, again I'm going to do this black and reflectivity dark. I might just start doing some mini renders instead and see how that looks. That doesn't look too bad as it is down there. Next we need to add a lighter chromey material or coppery material to the rest of it. So I want this to be like a nice silver colour along with that and the brand name there, and possibly that. So right click, assign another new material, Mentor materials, MIA material X. This is similar to what we have on the floor, but we want it to be a brighter colour. So I'm going to call it copper light, and then go to presets, copper, replace, and it should go gold. I'm just going to do that again, and then change the colours here to like grey and grey, and you should see it update over here. And if I zoom in, it should be giving us nice blurry reflections of the environment, and that doesn't look too bad. So you can make that light or as dark as you like. In fact, I like doing the diffuse colour quite dark and leaving the reflection colour fairly bright, and it just gives you really nice highlights like that. And you can also play around with the weight if you want. That should do. Next, we need to add a fabric material to the inside of these ear pads, so you can select both of those. And for the final material, it's going to be assign new material, Mentor Ray X, rename it to fabric, and presets, this would be matte finish replace, because fabric doesn't really reflect anything. And again, you can make that as dark as you like over there. Reset this. Well, that looks terrible. Let's try and make it match everything else. Alright, so those are the shaders all set up. Next thing we need to do is get ready to render the scene. We do not want to see the background in our final image. Remember, the final image looks more like this. and I don't really want to see any of that. So if you want to angle or rotate your environment, click on your environment and choose something that you'd like to be behind the camera. I think I went for something like that behind the camera, with that light behind where I'm looking. And the floor plane I made really sort of quite big, like this. You can just stretch out like that if you want. Good. And now I want to tell this sphere here not to be visible in our final renders, but to still cast reflections onto our scene. To do that, select the sphere, go to the tab called P-Sphere Shape 1, there's something called Render Stats, drop down there and uncheck Primary Visibility, and you can see that now it will cast reflections but won't be visible in the sky. And later on we're going to blur out the horizon line here, as you can see in Photoshop, so no one can really see where anything ends, and it doesn't look as tacky as this. We can do that with the depth pass. Next thing to do is to add a couple more colourful lights in here to make it look a bit more interesting. So if you duplicate your main light here, Control D, and maybe just have something over here. I'm going to make the colour of this light a bit more intense, blue or something like that. And you can put the intensity up if you want, or resize your light. I'm going to resize it down and angle it maybe up slightly. What you need to avoid is these tacky looking light bounces on the floor, where you can see like the line of the light, kind of like that. We need to avoid that. So if you angle your light in, maybe looking up or something, you should avoid that. And maybe move it closer to the geometry as well, if you really want. So now the headphones have a nice blue sort of tint to that side of them. You could do more like that, maybe add some red or something, but that'll do for now. The background's also way too bright compared to the one I did earlier, so to sort that out, click on your background, the plane here, go to the tab called Copper Grey that we made earlier, and have the reflection colour go down a bit as well. And as you do that, you should see the background go down. If you do it too much, the contrast is going to be much too similar as your headphones, but you can work it out. So something like that should be okay. I'm just going to get the floor and move it up ever so slightly. If I turn my wireframe and shade it on, I want the floor almost touching the bottom of the headphone, so we get that nice reflection like you see here. Okay, now to do our render settings, we're going to do it. I've asked my students to do their renders in 4K. So if we go to render settings up here, go to the common tab and make sure that you set the width to 3840 and the height to 2160. That will do for now for the common tab. Then go to quality and make the overall quality 2 and hit enter. Now we're going to render several passes of this, one for depth, one for occlusion, and all the camera angles need to match, so it's hugely important that you set up a camera for this. So go to create cameras, camera, and then go panels, perspective, camera 1, and you'll probably start off in the middle of the grid, so pan around and find the angle that you'd like again over here. And now we're going to actually keyframe our camera so that if we move it, we can always snap back to this particular angle. Click this button up here as well to make sure that you can see the exact frame you're going to render. Make sure you don't have any tangents where things are touching the top and the bottom exactly, so give it a little bit of breathing room. If scrolling backwards on your mouse is too much, you can hold Alt next to the spacebar and then hold right click to zoom in and out like that. To set the keyframe, drag the time slider to the beginning and hit S for set. You'll see a little red line appear. Whoops, before you do that, make sure the camera you're looking through is selected by clicking on this icon up here. So click on this icon up here, then hit S, and you should see a red line there. And so your camera is now keyframed. If you move your camera around to somewhere else to look at something or set something up, wiggle your time slider down here and your camera will snap back to this angle. I want to get my sphere and put it on its own layer as well. So select the sphere in the background, go to your channel box layer editor, which is this button in the top right, or it might appear on the right hand side here. Select the sphere and then click on this button down here, which will create a new layer with that geometry on, and you can turn it off whenever you like. You'll need to turn it off for the occlusion render, so just turn that V off. Make your ground plane however big you want. Now go to your render layer tab this is where we can right click on master layer, go to select objects in layer, and we're going to click on this button again here to put those selected objects onto a new render layer. And we're going to double click on that, name it occlusion, it might be AO or OCC is fine. Right click on that, go to attributes. If the attribute window doesn't come up straight away, you have to do it again. Go back to channel box layer editor, and again for the second time right click on attributes. This time we should see something that looks like this. Go to presets, occlusion, and go to the input icon here next to out color, and all you need to do is set the max distance. To start off with, we're going to set it to 1 so we get really tight contact shadows, and set the samples to either 64 or 128. And if you give that a render up here, it should give you an image like this with really tight contact shadows, and that is exactly what we need. So in your render view, save that image by going File, Save Image in the render view, and save it as a TIFF down here, and make sure you put occlusion in the file name as well. And next we're going to render a slightly different occlusion. Whenever I'm rendering my occlusion layers, I like to have one with really tight shadows like this, which is good for overlaying in Photoshop, and another one where the occlusion shadows are much looser, which just gives a really nice render of our geometry without any shaders or lights on it. So we need to do both. So to have something that looks more like this, you need to go back to your occlusion settings and set the max distance to something high. If you ever lose this window, you go back to channel box, right click up down here, go to attributes, go to the black input icon here, and the same again for there, and go to max distance and set it to something else like 50 or 100. And again, when you've done that, save it as a with a different file name, so occlusion contact perhaps for the tighter one, and just occlusion loose perhaps for this one. And next we're going to do a depth pass. To do that, you need to go back to your channel box or layer editor, right click on all the objects in master layer, select objects in layer, make another new layer with them on, double click, and we're going to call it depth. Right click on depth, go to attributes. Again, if the attributes window doesn't come up, you might see a depth tab up here which you can click on, or just go back down here, right click again and go to attributes, and you'll be back here. This time it's presets and it's luminance depth. Everything should go white if you have textured view on, so make sure textured view is enabled here. And we need to check our out color input icon here. And when you get to this screen, I want you to right click on old min and break connection, old max, break connection. That's clicking on the yellow boxes, and we can then start typing numbers into here. If I type in 20, well, that didn't work, or 100, I'm kind of guessing numbers here. Eventually we'll start to see a gradient in what's closer to the camera being brighter and what's further away being darker. If you want to know exactly what number to type in, you could always go to display, heads up display, and go to object details. And if you click on a part of your object that's furthest from the camera, you should see distance from camera over here, and in this case it's 36. So if I was to go to my depth attributes again over here, and type in 36 into old max, it should be black by the time it hits this headphone thing over there. So if I turn my wireframe off, we get this look, which would give us some really good depth of field. For this image, we need to have the black beginning beyond our headphones. So our headphones are some shade of light grey at least. So make sure that whatever your device is, you set the old max to maybe beyond your focal point. So I'm going to set mine to like 45 or perhaps even 50. If you want it to be more contrasty, you can get the old min and maybe type in a number in there so that you can see, so that the white starts further from the camera. This should do the trick here, like that, for a final render. So again, we can render this, go up here and render it. Maya will be really tricky, and it will change the render view to Maya software, which if you use smooth preview or hitting 3 on the keyboard for anything, it will look all jagged all of a sudden. So make sure you check mental ray up here for the depth pass and try rendering it again. It will take much longer when you render it with mental ray, but it's nothing compared to your are the ones. And then when that's done, again, go File and save that image as depth. And the last thing that we'll render is the beauty pass or the master layer. So if I close my render view, go back to my channel box layer editor, and I go back to my master layer down here where I can see all my colourful lights, and it's all back to normal. I need to turn my sphere back on for this render to work properly, so we've got all of our reflections. So go back to your display layer and turn on your display tab and turn on the layer that you made earlier, so you can see all your sphere and your environment around there. Go back to your render tab, make sure that's selected again, and go ahead and give that a render. And when that's done, you can go File, Save Image again as a TIFF and call it Master Layer or Beauty or something like that. I didn't finish rendering it because it's now 3:30 in the morning and I'm really tired. Okay, now we're finally ready to put our renders in Photoshop to get our final image. You should have 4 renders: the main or the master render, an occlusion with tight contact shadows, and an occlusion with loose occlusion shadows like that, and a depth. So if you drag in your headphones master or the colourful one into this grey tab up here in Photoshop, that will pop in. Directly above that, I need you to put in your contact or tight shadows occlusion render, and just drag that above this now and then hit enter straight away. It should line up perfectly. If it doesn't, you moved your camera and didn't sort of move it back. And finally, we need to bring in our depth as well. So drag that in to there and hit enter. For depth, we're going to turn that off for a minute and focus on the occlusion. Go to your occlusion layer and go to the blending mode and change it to multiply. You might not notice a whole lot, but I'm seeing some contact shadows over here when I turn that layer on, and it does help your geometry pop that much more. You need to now merge the occlusion contact layer with your master color background one. So select both layers, right click, merge layers. We now need to play around with the headphones depth, and I want to blur the background here. So if we go to turn that on, go to select color range, select anywhere that's black in your actual image, and choose the fuzziness up to 200, hit OK, and it will select something kind of like that. I want you to make a new layer down here, get your paintbrush, and if you want the background to be black, obviously just choose a black color and you can paint away. So if I turn my headphones depth off, make sure I'm painting onto my new layer or layer 1, it should paint like this, so it doesn't paint over our headphones, and it gives us a slight gradient at the bottom down there. In my opinion, that gradient's still a bit tight, like it's at the edge of a table or something, and I want it to fade away a bit more. To make it fade away more, make sure you've got the layer selected, hit E for eraser, right click and make sure you choose a soft round brush, choose a really big brush size, and just rub out like this. If you do it too much, you'll see the edge up there, so maybe I should make that a bit smaller. There you go, that'll do. So just paint over like that and you'll have a bit of a softer gradient going on there. We need to now go drag your headphones depth layer back to the top if it's not there already. Turn it back on again, hit Command A or Control A to select all, Command or Control C to copy. Now go to channels layer, go to the one that's called Alpha 1, and if there isn't something called Alpha 1, right click or click down here and add a new layer, and then just hit Command V to paste your depth information onto the alpha channel down here. Then go make sure just you click on RGB at the top, go back to layers, turn your depth off again for the last time, hit Command D to deselect, go to your background layer, merge it with any other layers that you've got like that. So you've just got the depth layer, which we could probably delete anyway, and then your background. Then go to filter, blur, choose lens blur, and depth map, choose a source as alpha or alpha 1. Put the blur radius up to something really quite big to start with so you can see what's getting blurred, and then choose a blur focal distance. If you want to focus on something that's lightly coloured, choose drag your slider over to this end. So I know that the headphones are quite lightly coloured over here. You probably won't need to drag it all the way to the end because that's probably at the camera, but if you drag it to the left a little bit, you'll eventually start seeing the parts of your geometry go into focus. So drag that slider until your geometry is in focus. If you're working with 4K images, your computer will be very slow at previewing this, so just deal with it. And then When you're happy with your blur amount, you can just set the radius, hit OK, and save your image. And if you're one of my students, you can now upload that to Google Drive along with your loose occlusion pass. And you've got yourself a nicely lit and rendered electronic device.